All right, welcome to the unofficial review. I'm Seeds, and this is my football review. All right, today I'm just gonna do one episode on I'll say what's going on in San Francisco. It's one of those things where, as the game was progressing, they were talking about possible QB switch. Afterwards, they asked players, they asked Chip Kelly, are we going to be possibly looking at a QB switch and what have you? And I don't know. As I was looking at it, I was just I was just being real with the situation. And personally, what I'm feeling is don't do a QB switch, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, realistically, the first thing I look at is what would you be making a switch for? You guys are 1-4, basement of the division. I mean, do you really think that Kaepernick, who we already saw what he's done before, we saw what he's capable of or lack thereof, do you suddenly think he's just going to win out and get into the playoffs and suddenly get it when year after year he's regressed? Not saying you might not see some improvements, but do you really think they'd be consistent? Because that's the thing, as you look at the problems that Gabbert had, which was missing wide open guys. Kaepernick did the same thing. Again, you look at points when Gabbert would start to get flushed out of the pocket, start to feel that pressure. He would tuck the ball and he would run. He committed to it. He wouldn't look downfield once the guys started swarming and catch the defense off guard, dumping the ball over, like other quarterbacks have. No, he would just commit to the run. Again, this is something that Kaepernick would do too, and it hurt him for it. So that's the thing, is what are you expecting to get at best from Kaepernick? What do you expect to get even if he wins a handful of games? And so again, so what are you getting for what do you get? What are you getting for what you give? And this is a big part of why I say do not make the switch, which is, to me, what you're going to get is you're going to get inconsistencies. That's one of the things that I've been looking at with a lot of teams that are winning with teams or with backup quarterbacks and such, like the Patriots, where they're winning with their third string quarterback at times. How does that happen? And to me, a big part of it is continuity. It's doing things time and time again, and so it becomes more of a habit, more of an instinctual behavior, rather than something you need to tell yourself to do. All right, don't make that bad play. Don't, and those teams that do well when they're missing team players, a big part of that is continuity. It's just that they're so used to it that they don't really have to think about it. And that's one of the things that I noticed when teams struggle, especially leading up to this point. The Cardinals have struggled, and it was, to me, it was, where did your skill go? It was, you guys essentially have the same team. I mean, you haven't lost to me from last year, really, of huge significance. So why are you playing so much shittier? Like I said, it was more or less they got in their heads and they stopped to get out of their rhythm. They stopped getting into that whole, think about what they needed to do in this situation, and they thought about the whole scope. Oh crap, we're at 1-3. We are supposed to all or nothing. What? And so their focus was shifted. Same thing with if they go back to Colin Kaepernick, like I said, you're not going to suddenly be a winning team that's going to compete for a title. So what are you getting? You're not getting a whole lot. And then two, what are you giving up? You're giving up consistency. If nothing else, what they need to do is that teams need to be able to stick with their quarterback for at least the rest of the year and make that quarterback not look over his shoulder. That was something I've noticed in the past, where quarterbacks have had somebody looking over their shoulder and they played worse because of it. Once they were on the hot seat in the middle of the season, a lot of times guys just crumble. And it's not to say that next year you most definitely, I think that most fans would go without saying that Colin Kaepernick or Blaine Gabbert isn't going to suddenly turn this franchise around. And so that's the one thing too, is that it's one thing if they had a rookie quarterback that they wanted to potentially see as the future and be like, okay, yeah, we're at 1-4, we have nothing to lose. If you lose a bunch of games, whatever, you at least get the experience. That would be a completely different circumstance. But what I'm saying is, so you're going to go back to Kaepernick, and I'm just going to say, all right, so let's say Kaepernick does well for a couple of games or whatever, and then starts to slip and starts to go back to his old tendencies. Well, he's going to know he's on the hot seat now, and that he's going to lose his job. And so he's going to start to think about that. And while he might make some mistakes, he's going to make a lot more mistakes if he knows that someone's looking at the back of him, preparing to take his job again. And so it's just this back and forth. You need some consistency. That's one of the things that I think has hurt the Browns for years, is that they've had so many quarterbacks and so many head coaches that everyone's just kind of assuming that they're going to eventually lose their job. And so that's the thing, is you look at established starters and they can have a shitty game. They can have shitty games weeks after weeks. It was the first 2 weeks. Aaron Rodgers was not playing up to par of what everybody expected, and but he knew that his job was not in jeopardy. He could have played crappy half the season. He still would have been the starting quarterback. So it's just one of those things where, to me, having that sense of knowing that you've got your job and protection there, once you've gotten it, is very important. And again, if nothing else, this is something where Blaine Gabbert can work on his confidence, can work on getting in a rhythm with these guys, because it wasn't like he's been playing for years with these receivers and what have you. There's a certain point where, like I said, they need to create a certain level of familiarity. They need to be able to be used to doing it. It's one of those things where I've been watching a discussion on the top tandems, the wide receiver and quarterback of all time. And the top two had, I think it was Peyton Manning and Harris. I can't remember. Marvin Harris? I think it was. Yeah, anyhow. But they had played together for years. And so there's a point where they could just look at each other and they would know what they were going to do. And so it's just one of those things where, that's what's going to create that type of consistency with the statistics, consistency with reps, consistency with knowing that it's your job. You think back at how bad Eli Manning was the first couple of years that he was playing. But the thing was is that he needed to know that job was his, regardless of the failures, so he could focus on improving rather than thinking about his failures. If he was honestly thinking, crap, I did not play up to par, I'm going to lose my job, he would have been thinking about the game. And so you're not going to succeed if you're looking over your shoulder, if you're focusing on your failures. You need to be able to focus on what you need to do now, and not what the crowd's saying, not this and that. That's the thing too, is that it seems like some teams also do go with that fan, whatever the fans want. That's where the direction the team's going to go. And again, that's one of those things where the fans don't necessarily know what they're talking about. And it's just one of those things where I like to think that some of us have intellect in the area, but as a mass, especially in the heat of the moment when they're seeing the quarterback fail, they're probably gonna, again, like I said, with the players, they're gonna act out of sorts in the heat of the battle. So are the fans. The fans, when they're in the heat of battle, are gonna want to crucify you if you're not doing well, if you look like you're just shooting the team in the foot. But yeah, like I said, I mean, it's 1 of 4. You're in the basement of your division. I don't think you have much of anything you're going to gain from putting Kaepernick back in. So to me, you need some continuity at the position. And while I'm not thinking that Blaine Gabbert's somebody you're going to stick with in the long run by any means after this year, at this point, based on the circumstances, I think that they at least need to stick with him for a few more weeks and give him a chance to, again, just focus on improving. It was one of those things where, again, you looked at Case Keenum and the Rams. He played horrendous. I don't think a quarterback could have played as bad as he played in that first game against the Niners, or less, against a mediocre team. But that was the thing, was that Fisher did not question who was a starter, and then you see him get better. But that was the thing, is I think if he had put that pressure on Case Keenum of, this guy screws up, he's gone, or because he screwed up, he's gone, it would have just created this whole level of, you need to succeed immediately. And again, that's one of the hardest, if not hardest, positions to fill, is the quarterback position. So again, he needs to know he's got his job, and he can't be focusing on distractions around him where guys could steal his job. Again, especially a guy who, as we've seen, is mediocre. His ceiling is only so high. So it's one of those things where it's like, let's say Gabbert gives you a 4-12 record, and let's say Kaepernick gives you a 7-9. What did you get for what what you gave up? You gave up continuity. You gave up letting people know, hey, you at least got the year to get it done. But that's the thing, like I said, is, so to me, you stick with Gabbert at least for quite some more time. I would give him at least a handful more weeks, even if he sucks it up. Because, again, you're going to get much more of that. We've got your back, even in the hard times. Like I said, for me, I think in order to create a really good team, it's like a marriage. You need to be with them in the sickness and in health, and when things are good and when things are shitty. Because, like I said, anybody can back you when things are good. When my bank account's full and I'm buying everybody drinks, of course, I'm everyone's best friend. But what are they gonna think about me when I'm down and out and I need their help, when I need them to get my back because I've fallen? That's when that someone's true character is shown. It's easy to back somebody when they're doing well, but when they fall, are you going to get their back? And that's really going to, again, it's going to create a sense of unity within that team. But anyhow, so I'm sure it's going to be a developing story. I'm sure that there'll be other instances that we can reflect on it and show that going back and forth between quarterbacks, especially when a team has very low prospects at this point, it's not, to me, it's not beneficial. But we'll get back to that later.